Okay, hello and welcome to the video. My name is Wade Smith, and I am a black belt candidate or first Q in Isshinryu Karate. I had 6 years training in Isshinryu Karate altogether because they don't give away black belts in there like some people mistakenly think. And I also have an additional 1.5 years in Gracie Brazilian Jiu Jitsu from Raphael Elringer, fifth degree black belt in Gracie Jiu Jitsu. He happens to be a cousin of Royce Gracie. All right, is where my Gracie BJJ experience comes from. And they never promoted me in Gracie BJJ in a year and a half because he already considered me to be at least brown belt level in there, and I was tapping out his black belt students, but he just never promoted me to black belt because I didn't meet his minimum time requirements to be a black belt in there. And plus, he only came to class like once a month, which is kind of ridiculous. But because he operates like 20 something of the schools around here. But let me get off that topic for a second. All right, so the topic of this video is about how to counter certain wrestling or BJJ moves without using BJJ moves of your own, but instead using Japanese jiu-jitsu or just pure karate moves. In karate class, among our 15 basic strikes were different types of elbow strikes. I mean, we actually did more than the 15 basics because, but we have elbows and knee strikes in karate class. I don't know why people think Thai kickboxing is the only style that uses elbows and knees. It's nuts. It's been a basic Okinawan karate strike for 140 years, is elbows and knees. All right. So when they go for double underhooks, what does that do? That leaves my arms up here. All right. There are counters. I can elbow strike you in the face, in the chin, or in the temple, or behind the ear, depending on how your head is oriented, or straight into your eye. Because the elbow actually will hit straight into the orbital of your eye if you time it right. All right. So the double underhooks might be the best position for throwing, but it's not the best position for the grappler to defend himself against strikes because a palm heel strike is going to be pretty hard to pull off right up in here, but it's better than nothing. But an elbow strike, it's got a foot and a half or two of acceleration range before it's going to make contact, and you can either clinch and strike or you can just elbow because you can clench on their neck or their shoulder as a fulcrum, as a balancing point with your other hand, and elbow with your strong hand. Wham, wham, wham. All right. And so if they go for the double underhooks, of course you're going to counter by getting in a deeper stance. You're going to immediately take a half step back and get in a deeper stance. So they have to get in a deeper stance. And then that's going to allow you to elbow strike them straight in the head because their head's going to be right next to you. Another thing is if they try to place their head on your chest or on your shoulder and turn their head sideways to try to minimize the range of your elbow strike, you're going to clench over their shoulders and neck and pull them down into a vertical knee strike. Okay. And it's going to go straight into their lower abdomen, most likely, right at belt knot to solar plexus level is where we want to be hitting them if we hit them in the abdomen. Or alternatively, we could try pulling them all the way down so that their chin or forehead or nose gets hit by the knee strike. Okay. And that's all in the hand play before they even get the double underhooks. You can try that ahead of time. But even when they get the double underhooks, you can still take a half step back and then counter your own momentum and throw into that vertical knee strike straight into the lower abdomen is what we're really going to do to counter double underhooks in any kind of street fight or MMA scenario. All right. So I don't know why they think double underhooks is some kind of unbeatable position for the grappler because it's not. The striker, if he's actually done the reps and done the full contact sparring training, the striker should not have any trouble getting out of double underhooks. I discussed in the other video passing the guard of a BJJ practitioner, which we don't even want to bother passing their guard. If it's a no rules fight, we're just going to ankle lock them. If it's an MMA fight, we're going to ankle lock them from the cross foot position. All right. We're not going to try to pass guard because, and then if there's a referee, we're just going to step back and make him stand up and fight us again. Is what we really want to do in MMA. But in a street fight, if we want to ankle lock somebody, we don't have to pass their guard. We can do that from the standing position. But don't fight the BJJ guy's game. All right, make him stand up and fight you for real. If it's a MMA fight, and you're mostly a striker with some Japanese jiu-jitsu experience, use your Japanese jiu-jitsu to help keep his grappling away and just rely on your striking. Because I guarantee you, if you take a good Okinawan class of karate for 6 years, your striking is going to be 10 times better than a guy over at the Gracie United Dojo striking, because they think a randomly untrained punch is as good as a trained punch, and it's not. I guarantee you, I punch way the heck harder than anybody that's a full-time grappling trainer. When I went to their school for a year and a half, during the bag work days, which they only work on bags like once a week for striking, they started me out on a 200 something pound bag. And when they saw how hard I hit the bag and that I didn't need any work on a 200-pound bag, they moved me to a 500 some odd pound bag filled with sand and lead shot. And that's what I worked out on. It was a hanging bag, while everybody else pissed around on a 200-pound standing water bag. All right. So that just gives you an idea of the difference of what a high quality striker is. A high quality striker can wear out those 100 to 150, 200-pound bags in a couple sessions. You can kick that thing plumb across a room. Like this room right here, I think is 15 feet. And I could probably kick a standing water bag. I mean, I got to have a few feet to work with here. But I could probably kick a standing water bag from the side of this side of the room all the way to the wall on the far side of the room. I know I can kick them 10 feet because I've measured that before back whenever I used to work out full time. And so a lot of the striking that you see in UFC is inferior striking. I will agree with the boxers on that. A lot of the striking in UFC is inferior. They tend to work too much on grappling and not enough on striking. Every fight, even in UFC and MMA, every fight, even in UFC and MMA, starts from the standing position. So you should be trained to fight from the standing position. The ground position is where you go when somebody trips and falls or a takedown happens. The standing position is the beginning of a fight, and the beginning of a fight often dictates what will happen at the end of the fight. What else would I want to cover? So Ramsey Dewey, the judge, the MMA judge, claims that joint locks do not work. I must respectfully disagree with you for like the 100th time, Ramsey Dewey, because I know firsthand that they work because I was my sensei's demonstration partner, and he tapped me out must be 5,000 times in the 6 years he was training me. Well, he trained me for 4.5 years. My previous sensei trained me for the first year and a half. But let's say 4.5 years, and he must have tapped me out 5,000 times with 200 different variations of joint locks. So I know that they work, and I was not tapping out easy. The reason he used me as a demonstration partner is I had a high pain tolerance, and he could demonstrate the full lock on me before it would finally tap me out. All right. His previous demonstration partner was 155 pounds and didn't have a high pain tolerance. I was 185 pounds at the time and had a pretty high pain tolerance. And so he could demonstrate the real move on me. And they do work no matter how much you resist them. Generally, your brain will not let you resist them beyond a certain point. You're either going to go with it or you're going to tap out because it ends up hurting so bad that your brain says, no, you can't fight that. You're going to lose your arm. And you go with it. All right. So anybody who says that joint locks don't work or that they're low percentage has never had them done on them. The way I used to win the 1 versus 2 handicap challenge against the other brown and black belts in Mark's dojo whenever he was testing me for black belt, which, by the way, technically I failed the black belt test 6 consecutive times, but I was not on a timer to finish my black belt testing. I had to quit for personal and family reasons because at the time I was focusing on college, and that's why I quit full-time martial arts training. In hindsight, I should have quit college and focused on full-time fighting. And then I might have actually made something in that career path. All right. So your typical, you're not going to catch a jab 99% of the time out of the air, even if you do block it. But a cross punch travels about a foot farther And you can, in fact, punch, block, and deflect and capture your opponent's cross punch, rather, and apply different types of joint locks, as I discussed on the other video. You can apply a front wrist lock, in which in MMA you have to grab across all four fingers. You're not allowed to grab three or fewer fingers at a time with a front wrist lock, which greatly weakens the effectiveness of the lock. But even the four finger lock is going to tap somebody down, and when you combine it with knee strikes and front kicks, you're going to wear them out pretty quickly, 5 or 10 seconds, and they're going to be tapping out, or the ref's going to have to call a stop to it before you break their arm or break their ribs. All right, that's the front wrist lock. It's the easiest and most basic lock in Japanese jiu-jitsu. And for a street self-defense situation, grabbing 2 or 3 fingers is ideal. We want to grab 2 or 3 fingers because it makes it easier to break those fingers, and it actually makes it easier to break your opponent's wrist. All right, so for street self-defense, grab 2 or 3 fingers and don't grab all 4 fingers. For MMA, grab all 4 fingers. All right, because that's the rule. You got to grab all. You can't do small joint manipulation in MMA. All right, but the next one is the reverse wrist lock, and they throw. Most styles throw a horizontal twist punch like boxing. Ishin karate throws a vertical fist punch, and I'm not going to explain why just yet, but we have scientific reasonings why we think that's as good or better than the twist punch. But if they throw a twist punch, they're setting themselves up because, first of all, some of the energy gets wasted in a twist punch because it goes into the twist rather than a straightforward penetrating action. That's one of the reasons we use a vertical punch. They throw the twist punch, you parry it, you twist their hand, and look at that. I'm suddenly in a reverse wrist lock. I can twist it over and up at the same time, and I can put pressure. And before you know it, I've got sidearm control or rear control of their body from a reverse wrist lock position. I demonstrated that to a guy one time, and he was running his mouth about how he thought he beat all these Gracie jiu-jitsu fighters and stuff. And I was like, yeah, throw a punch at me at demonstration speed. I said, throw about a 3/4 speed punch at me, and let me show you something, how easy it is to beat you. So he threw a 3/4 speed punch at me, and I'm like, I already had him in a reverse wrist lock. And he's like, oh my God, don't do that cop shit to me. Don't do that cop shit to me. And I'm like, that's called jiu-jitsu. That you just claimed you beat all these people. And I'm like, I can tap you out. I said, even if you threw a full speed punch at me, I'd have you tapped down in 2 seconds flat. So most people don't even know what they're talking about when they're talking about tapping somebody out or beating a black belt. A real black belt does not get beat by an unskilled fighter. A real brown belt shouldn't get beat by an unskilled fighter. All right. So the counter, when they throw that jab cross, you probably won't be able to get a full parry on a jab, but you can head movement, move side to side, or just simply twist your body so that your guard deflects it a little bit. But a good jab, you're generally not going to be able to grab hold of a jab out of the air. But the cross punch has to travel about a foot farther from a typical stance. And so you've got a split second longer to react to a cross punch. And one in every couple cross punches that comes your way, you can, in fact, catch out of the air and apply a wrist lock to them. I know because that's also how I beat the black belts, including in handicap matches. Because in terms of fighting ability, I was by far my sensei's best student at the time that I was full-time attending there. Let me explain my training regime at the time. I was doing at home on my own time, I was doing 2 sets of 50 push-ups. And then in the cardio kickboxing class, I was doing 5 sets of 20 push-ups. And in the traditional class, an hour later, I was doing 5 more sets of 20 push-ups. Altogether in a day, I was doing about 200 lunges and jump squats, 200 jumping jacks, at least 100 to 200 setups in sets each day, and running 1.5 miles each day. All of that mostly on my own time, besides what the warm-up in karate class was. All right. An hour of cardio kickboxing under a 3rd-degree black belt instructor, advanced cardio kickboxing under a 3rd-degree black belt instructor at the time, on a 225-pound standing water bag. And then 2 hours of traditional karate instruction, which included at least 30 minutes of full contact sparring, not counting kumite, which is basically positional sparring to teach bunkai at about 3/4 speed. All right. And so the naysayers to traditional karate are all like, well, nobody's just going to stand there and let you do the bunkai moves on them. We know that. You modify you're a big deal. You're not telling us anything we don't already know. You modify your technique instinctively by both instinct and experience based on how they modify their technique. So nobody goes, even though we practice the 5 swords American Kenpo karate move through the first 5 moves, all right, I don't expect the real fight to go exactly like that. So we've practiced 5 to 10 variations of 5 swords. I can double chop block here. If he throws another punch, I can just block that one. And let's say if he throws a hook punch to get over my guard, I can pow. If he does something else, I'm going to do something else. Maybe instead of the uppercut to the body, I'm going to grab him by the shoulders and knee strike him to the body, or pull, or grab him by the back of his head and pull his face down into a knee strike. I'm not going to do the same thing if he does something different. Of course, we're going to adapt instinctively and through experience of what we. That's why we have full contact sparring. Because Sensei will be like, work on your submissions. Well, Sensei, you realize that that's a 2nd degree black belt, and submitting him at full contact is not easy. You know, it took me probably a year or 2 after Sensei started saying, work on your submissions against the other black belts before I ever managed to get one of them in a submission. Because it's true that getting submissions on somebody is pretty hard when they're resisting. But I'm not claiming that it's magic. I'm just saying, try it and do something different than the same old BS that everybody's already seen in MMA. All right. But yeah, it must have taken me a year or 2 after he started letting me spar the black belts before I ever got a submission on one of the other brown or black belts. But that's normal because they were already at that rank. I was trying to get that rank. And the truth is, I was a better fighter than his other black belt and brown belt students. I just sucked at kata, and I kept failing the kata portion of the test. Is the real reason why I never actually got my black belt. All right, because by rule you had to pass all 4, and so even if you were twice as good a fighter as you were expected to be at a given rank, you still didn't get promoted if you sucked at kata. And I sucked at kata. It took me twice as long to learn a new kata as it did anyone else. Because I'm not good at memorizing sequences of 50 moves in a row. I am good at memorizing sequences of 2 to 5 moves in a row. But there's a difference. One is short-term memory and one is very long-term memory. All right. Similarly, I can't remember somebody's 10-digit phone number to save my life. I think I got 2 of them in the world memorized, and one of them is my own mother. All right. So don't expect me to remember your phone number if you rattle it off to me in a conversation. I have to write it down or key it into the phone, or I'm going to forget it 5 minutes later. All right. So counters to a kick, especially a roundhouse kick. When you see in MMA, they throw their roundhouse, and let me work it around and balance myself. They throw their roundhouse and it gets caught out of the air. And instead of putting an ankle lock on the person like they should, they release the foot and just throw their foot down and then try to throw for a punch. What you should do is put an outside heel hook on the person and tap them out immediately, and the fight is over. You do not need to release. You should basically, when you get hold of something of your opponent's, 9 times out of 10, you should never release whatever you got hold of. Just hold on to it, especially in MMA where there are rules to protect you against some of the counters. Hold what you got and beat them from that position. Because you've got control of one of their members of body and they have control of nothing of yours. All right. And like an outside heel hook is devastating. It can be damn near crippling. In fact, it can break your and dislocate your hip bone, which, there's no rule against an outside heel hook specifically, although there is a general rule not to intentionally injure your opponent. But you can say, I didn't intend to hurt the guy. I was just doing what the right damn thing would be in a fight. An outside heel hook, there's no rule against it. And if he gets hurt, so what? He shouldn't have thrown a bad roundhouse. That's the way fight science works. If he got hurt, he shouldn't have thrown a bad roundhouse. And then, like, Israel Adesanya and Alex Pereira get all the credit for being good kickers in MMA. But the truth is, the 2 best kickers in MMA, at least in the UFC promotion, are Kamaru Usman and Sean Strickland. And I don't even know if Kamaru Usman is still fighting because it's been a long time since the last time I saw one of his fights. But Sean Strickland's got a wicked front snap kick and a pretty good front thrust kick. You never see Israel Adesanya use straight kicks. He's always using round kicks. And I've always said that throwing round kicks against another pro fighter is actually a very bad idea 9 times out of 10. Because a round kick is the easiest kick there is to evade or block or dodge or jam somehow. The round kick comes in, you can just take a step back and make it miss. You can take a step to the side and then he's going to miss and he's going to spin out of control either way there. You can step into the round kick and low block here. And you're like, well, what are you going to do if he throws a punch? You still got another hand, which you can high block here or here. All right. But you can step into the kick and low block into the femoral artery with like a hammer fist or a double bone block, either way. And you're going to cause him more pain than it causes you. And believe me, this is how we used to spar in Ishinru karate sometimes, especially if I sparred Matt Griga, because he studied anatomy in addition to what Sensei already taught. And he would hit your nerve endings and your muscle groups and stuff like that in a fight. And I learned to do that same thing against him. So when you throw a roundhouse kick, the counter to a roundhouse kick can be to step in and jam the person as you throw one strike, throw a strike high and throw a block low against the kick. There's what we call, simultaneous blocking and striking. It's not a new concept, but it doesn't get used very often because people don't think about it. Some people have never been trained in it, and some people just don't think about it on their own unless they do get trained in it. But, you're going to block and counter in the same motion. There's a punch coming in. I circle blocked it, grappled it, and I palm heeled and countered and eye gouged all in one motion. It might not be legal in UFC, but in a street fight, that would save your life. So it's bow, or it can just be like that. As simple as that. They throw a punch to the body or a punch to the head. You circle block it. You're grappling it. You're countering to their head all in one motion. And now you pin their arm to your side. You've got front arm control, and you can throw knee strikes into their abdomen, push their face down into your knee strike, whatever. All right. So don't tell me that doesn't work, because I used to do that against brown and black belt fighters, so I know it does work.